part 2, which is actually part 12, Ezekiel 22. So it says here, Ezekiel 22, verse 30, Ve'ah-bakash. So see, there's the Aleph prefix, bet kuf shin, sought for or repeatedly begged. Mem, hey, mem. Well, mem, hey is what, when, why, how. Hey, mem is them. So mem is a place. So it's basically, I sought their place, or from among them, each man, gadar, gadar. If I looked at other words that spelled with gimel dalet and then dalet resh dar is like generation, or your turn in the circle in the queue. Gadal is majestic. Haggadah, hey gimel dalet hey, that's a narrative that you tell at Passover. That's the Passover story. Haggadah. Well, hey prefix just simply means the. Gimel dalet, then that's where we get the word God, which is the deity of fortune and luck. And it's like, well, to tell a story, a narrative where something good happens, so you have a moral to the story, like a Hollywood movie, can be a Gadah. So Gimel Dalet Resh, well, Resh, I could say, well, that's a Gadah of the Resh man. What Resh man? Well, Yeshua, he's the Resh man. The Vav man becoming the Resh man, the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. After going through this chrysalis of the death zone. That's a story. That's a story narrative of how does a human man, Adam, Vav status somehow transcend the limitation. Thank you, Adam the first, locked us into this mortality, this hitting a block wall that Yahusha blows us through, giving us this option, the dalet of the door to live with him forever in his Father's realm. That's the Resh status. So I can look at that into Gadar depending on the value I give the letters. But then the people who say there is no value to the letters unless it's Kabbalah, it's like, I don't think Kabbalah looks at Yahusha. You see, if I looked at Yahusha being the Vav man slain, put into the tomb, and then resurrecting at Zadi, ascending at Kuf, up into the Resh status and coming back as Resh Shin Tav to gather his betrothed, his Aleph Resh Shin Tav means betrothed. That's not a Jewish Kabbalah thing. They're not going to look at that. They're going to turn a blind eye to that part of the reading. Well, if I say, listen, the Mishkan pattern correlates, locks in the meaning of the letters based on the Moedim, that's the Mishkan pattern. The articles of the Mishkan, the fence, the barbecue grill, the laver, those are out on the outside. And then you have on the inside, the tented, covered, sukkah-like place, you've got the menorah, table of showbread, the altar of incense. Then there's a veil and a most set apart. The Kadosh Kodashim is the Ark of the Covenant. And then above that, when Yahweh's presence was there, is a pillar of fire, pillar of smoke. That's the pattern. He designed that, Exodus 25, told Moshe, he showed him the patterns, said, make the one on earth exactly like I showed you. So that's his. Before there was anybody, he designed the 7 days of creation, which fits it. He designed the Moedim and gave it to his people. And apparently, from what some people say, even stuff that Abraham did, and when, I guess, the flood happened, or when events before happened, before he gave us the Moedim exactly laid out in Leviticus 23, the calendar was correlated to the Moedim. So in Genesis 1 on day 4, where it says the stars are put into the sky according to the Moedim, it's translated, that's seasons. Seasons, Moedim are the appointed times. Well, seasons are appointed times. The festivals are called Moedim, and they're the appointed times of gathering. So again, if I just say, well, there is no festivals, Jewish holidays for us to concern ourselves with, that's an Old Testament Jewish done away with, nailed to the cross. It's like, no, it was put there on day 4. Stars in the sky according to the Moedim. It all depends how you translate it. So if I say, look, this is all his stuff. His stuff. What he did on the 7 days of creation, what are the Moedim, how to build the Mishkan, and then for Yahusha to sit on the Mount, Matthew 5, and give the Sermon on the Mount, that all lines up too. And I found more than 500 places in Scripture where it lines, and the alphabet lines up. It's his stuff. It's got his signature, his fingerprint, his iris scan. I mean, how much, it's his DNA. I mean, how much more proof does someone need to confirm one's identity? How many more things can I look at validating this Aleph-Beit as being autographed by Elohim, who called himself Ehyeh or Yahuwah? He called himself that, but he used the letters of the Aleph-Beit to call himself that. So he had to first invent the Aleph-Beit and use the meaning of those letters because of where they were in the position of the Aleph-Beit. So he had to arrange all this stuff. It's not Kabbalah. It's just that the Kabbalists are the only ones smart enough to take the time to look into it. That doesn't make them wrong. It just means if you look at any true thing and twist it, if you take Yeshua as the Mashiach of Israel and you turn him into a Christ figure God who changes, distorts, and nullifies all of the Torah, that's a perversion, is bad or worse than what the Kabbalists might do if they negate the reality, the sacred kadoshness. Now, they might think it's kadosh, just like any Christian might think that worshiping JC, eating the things he said not to eat, to his glory, he told us to eat this. He gave Peter a vision, by golly. He gave Peter a vision, told him 3 times, get up and eat that pork. We do because he told Peter. Well, he told Moshe, don't eat the pork. Nah, Peter knew Jesus. Does that qualify that vision? Even Peter didn't say it was about that. It's like, listen, you got to get in your head for yourself the reason for making a decision, the reason for defining the terms. That's Gadar Gadar. The reason why we think the letters mean this or the words mean that is to define giving definition. Is that why he wrote Gadar, hyphenated to Gadar? It's not just definition. It's have a reason, define the basis of your definition. The Mishkan pattern. It's knowing Yahusha is the Mashiach. And then in Daniel 12, where he said, hide the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Okay, until the time of the end. End of what? End of the world? No, he didn't say the end of the world. It might be the end of the curse, which would have been 2010 if the reckoning of time we have is solid, which it may not be, but nothing we can do about that. We don't know. But the word until, spelled ayin dalet, and the word time is spelled ayin tav. So until the time is ayin dalet, ayin tav. It's hyphenated, 2 separate words. But ayin means weigh, balance, determine, measure, calculate, precisely, exactly, determinably. Dalet is door. What door? Where's the door? Yeshua said, I'm the door. Okay, so if I say, I'm going to listen to his words. Sorry, if you're a Jew, you can't hear these words because he's a scoundrel, an infidel, and you don't want to listen to him because you're told not to. So Jews can't iron that dalet of Yahusha being that door. Yeah, but what if he's not? What if I'm just making this up? Too bad for me. If I'm making it up, then I'm in big trouble. Yeah, but what if I'm not making it up? What if that's what he said? When he said the word until, if it was spelled ayin dalet, and the word ayin dalet means a witness, a testimony, a bejewelment, ayin dalet yod. Choice, best, treasure, ornamentation, adornment, bejewelment. That's the Moedim. Memvav ayin dalet yod mem, the appointed times until I recognize Yeshua being that door. That's one consideration. But what about until I recognize that the Moedim are the bejewelment of Yahuwah that testify of his identity, like got his DNA going on? Not that he has DNA, but if he was going to invent himself to have something like DNA, that would be the 22-letter sequence of the Aleph-Bet by which he made the entire world, which gives him the glory as being an expression of what it is he projected, which is all of himself, or such little piece of himself that he used to manifest this cosmos, though it could have been more, it could have been different, and if it's infinite, who knows what we have in store going back the other side of the Aleph. But see, as you contemplate these things, it all makes sense. At least it makes sense to me. If it all makes sense, well, what's Ayin Tav? Ayoning the Tav. And if the Tav is literally each letter, a mark, a symbol, a signature, a signet ring, something symbolically that means something else. Well, that's the same definition of the word Aleph Vav Tav. Aleph Vav Tav is translated oath, but it's a symbol, it's a signal, it's an agreement. So it's a symbol that refers to an agreement. And when he holds up his hand and swears, that's like swearing an oath. And in Ezekiel 20, in these chapters here, that word is used quite a few times, Aleph Vav Tav. Aleph Vav Tav Yod, my oath. So if I can then identify each one of these 22 letters as Yahuwah's personal, I swear, sworn testimony that he's the guy that says something and then does it. That's what Yahuwah means. Hei Vav Hei is the verb to exist. Yod, prefix, means he will cause to exist. Cause what to exist? Then he says many times all through the chapters 16 through 38 at least of Ezekiel, he says, then they'll know that I am Yahweh. And he says, when I am sanctified through you, then they'll know. What does that mean? Well, the word sanctified is kadosh. So it basically says, like in Ezekiel 36:23, Israel, your job was to declare my reality, my being, my essence, my stuff. Your job was to be the vehicle, the dalet. You were going to be the emissary that was supposed to display the grandeur of Yahweh. That was the one job of Israel. And Israel said, I don't think so. We're going to go and revel with the Assyrians and Egyptians and their gods and their culture. And then go after whatever Elohim Achrim, gods of others, fantasy deities, male and female. It's like, what about Yahweh? We don't like that stuff. We don't believe in that stuff anymore. It's like, what? That's what ticked him off. And he keeps saying that. He said it 3-4 times there in Ezekiel 20. I was going to kill them all. And it's like, I don't want to ruin my reputation. So he seems to want, though, the reputation that when we get him mad, he's going to kill us all. That's the reputation that he wants, but he didn't want to exactly do that. But he talks about doing that. So he wants to be known as the guy that can and will, except there's a higher order agenda that he wants to pull off. Well, what's that? To a certain degree, tolerance, but not just tolerance, it's forgiveness, but only forgiveness if you repent. And if you don't repent, you're done. You and the entire generation. So to understand who he is and to project who he is, to tell the nations who he is Israel's job description. So when he says in Ezekiel 36:23, you profaned my name, you slandered my reputation in the eyes, in the ayin, in the understanding and the calculation of the Gentiles amongst whom you were scattered, you perverted, distorted, shamed, mutilated my reputation. Well, for how long? Till even now. That's why nobody can see his name in these letters. Yeah, but if seeing his name in these letters is the turnaround event, You look at Ezekiel 36:23, and it says, then everything will change when I made kadosh in you in their eyes. Well, there's a couple different ways that can happen. One, he destroys us for being stupid, for being treacherous with his truth that he gave to us, just like the previous generations. And he says, see, I'm the Elohim that can and will destroy my own people if they betray me. Okay, the big, mean, ugly monster God of the Old Testament. He's also wants to be known as the one who is willing to forgive the wicked. Like that verse in Ezekiel, is it 23, I think, where it says, if the wicked man stops doing wickedness and starts doing righteousness, he will live on account of his righteousness. But if the righteous man stops doing righteousness and starts doing wickedness, he's going to die. And people say, no, that's not fair. He says, you don't think it's fair? There's that whole conversation going on. That's mishpat. That's balancing of scales. And he says, I'm the guy, I'm Adon. I'm Adonai, which means I'm the one who gets to make up the determinations. That's Adonai. So when he stamps his name, Ani Yahweh, I'm Yahweh, or Nam Yahweh, so declares Yahweh. But when he stamps his name with, like when I say like a signet stamp, Nam Adonai Yahweh, he's saying, look at, there's no argument here. It's my jurisdiction to make this determination. This is what it is. I'm telling you what it is. That's the judgment, and it's done. That's it. Okay. So if he says, I'm telling you this is the way it works, you stop doing wickedness, reshinayin, harm, calamity, injury, and you start doing righteousness, truth and kindness, helping the downtrodden, I declare you'll live. It's like, well, wait a minute. Why didn't he mention about Yeshua dying on the cross? He didn't have to tell us the mechanism. He just said this is what it's going to be. So if I can say, did he mean live in this life or live for eternal life? He didn't say either one, did he? He just said that guy will live. And he might have had in his mind, Yahusha dying on the cross and blowing out the other side of the grave is what makes that, ensures that, causes that to be. But he didn't have to tell us that, just like he didn't have to tell Adam and Hua the mechanics of why they shouldn't eat that fruit. There's a prion, and if you eat it, it'll get in you and you'll never get it out for the rest of your generations forever. If I don't know all the details, I could still look at this language and see all those details in there, or pieces of the details. It doesn't negate, but the question is, how much do I have to understand in order to just do what he said? So if he wants to be known as the guy who's going to do what he says, when he says something and it happens, so every time he says, then you'll know that I'm Yahweh. Why? It's like Moshe saying, give me a sign. What's the, you tell me I'm going to go back to Egypt where he used to be a man with a price on his head. You want me to go back to Egypt and tell the Pharaoh to let go all his slaves? By what authority? Why would he do such a thing? Well, that's the story of the Exodus. And then Yahuwah said, then you're going to come back here and worship me on this mountain, Mount Sinai. And he says, can you give me proof? Can you give me a sign? And Yahweh says, the sign is you're going to stand here and worship me on this mountain. That's the proof. It's like, how do we know there's going to be a resurrection of the dead? When you die and you come back to life and wake up and have your eyes and your consciousness, there's the proof. That's where the proof is going to be. So when he says, I'm going to destroy these people, then they'll know that I'm Yahweh. You're going to remember that I said I'm going to destroy you. Oh, okay. And when he says, I told you, Israel, that I'm going to gather you from the nations and take you back and put you, each one of you, into the land that I raised my hand and swore to your fathers that I was going to do. Well, I can say, listen, unless America is that land, he hasn't done it yet because I'm still sitting here. And if he says each one of you, that includes me, and whether I can prove my genealogical DNA being of those 12 tribes or not, I can certainly claim I choose to be his. And if I choose to be his, He's not going to leave me sitting here if he's going to take me back to the land. And I don't necessarily want to go back to the land, especially what's going on right now. But you see, he said, we will live. There's verses here in Ezekiel. He says, you guys can sleep in the forest without being afraid. No wild animals, no Bigfoot, no space aliens, no weirdos in the woods that it's going to come and do bad things to you in the middle of the night. That hasn't happened yet. So there's a whole bunch of stuff hasn't happened yet. And we're going to live there for a long time. It could be 1,000 years. Well, is that, like some people say, after the 7-year bridal supper of the Lamb and then coming back here for 1,000 years? Or is it 1,000 years in front of us now? I don't know. He just said it's going to happen, and it hasn't happened. So this is not the end of the world. So what should we be about doing? Well, we should be about declaring his majesty in truth, which means his name is Yahweh or Ehyeh, the Lord. That sound, the Lord, is not his name. Hashem, the name, it's a kind of referral to, it's not what he said. He said, Yahweh is the name to be called on for refuge. And these Moedim, he said, are the appointed times. And so when he says in Ezekiel, your forefathers sacrificed and burned incense under every interesting tree and on every high hill, and you called it a high place? It's not a high place, because a high place means a sacred in place of engaging the divine spirit realm. This says, I'm not there. That's not my stuff. So why do you call it a high place? And why do you still engage it? Why do we call Christmas, Easter, and Halloween Halloween? Hallowed? That's holy, the holy evening, Halloween. Why do you even call it that? It's not. It's not prescribed by him. Yeah, well, it's just fun and games. Really, just fun and games. You think it was fun and games to have 2,500 missiles launched at you last week? Think that's fun and games? So here's verse 30 and 31, eriktology translation. Ezekiel 22. I searched for and repeatedly begged that from among them, just a man, any one of them, define the narrative, publish a new edition, provoke teshuvah, arrange a wall around the specified majestic adornment, designate the kadosh. That'd be the Mishkan pattern. Give value and esteem with reason and understanding of the establishment. Stand at the position of what is fruitful and pleasing, in my estimation, for the sake of the land, so it would not have to be destroyed by terror. The truth regarding matters of the kingdom of heaven has lost definition, has spread unrestrained to include destructive aspects which are insolently false. Organize the presentment so that someone volitionally desiring to be of testimony as being Am Yahuwah, people measured by, determined by, being fit, suited to the arranged order, as befits the designation of Kadoshim Elyonim, can stand in the prescribed position as qualified by being in agreement with the ordained regard. In that status, atonement is found for the breach of agreement. As a tree lushly ornamented with citrus fruit, gone rotten, so the spoilage makes the tree lost of its grandeur, so is Israel. And no one cares or has done anything to correct the problem. I could not find, it didn't happen, not one man. It wasn't invented yet. There was no publication of my Aleph Tav. That's all verse 30. Here's 31. So the quiver filled with your own arrows rained down upon you, your own ways, angry fire. I have terminated my concern of you. You are orphans. I led you, guided you, warned you from the very beginning. Thus saith, by such words is the judgment decreed. I cause it to be. He's basically saying, you don't want my language, I'll speak your language. there's world history. But if he was looking for a man, ish gadar gadar, ve'amad be'paretz, see, he's not subject to time. And there's something about us being his people, present tense, is always the same thing. He presented the covenant to the subsequent generation, and they profaned his name also. So how do you not profane his name? The Moedim are the ed, the witness and the testimony of his identity. Something about Yahusha being identical, Zion Hey Hey, to the identity of the guy coming from Aleph, or the word spoken, projected from the Aleph. See, the whole Aleph-Bet has to be, you might say, self-referential, self-contained. So if I sit here and say, yeah, but what if I'm wrong? What if this whole study is incorrect? I was talking to a friend the other day, and he said, listen, the Jews rejected Jesus as the Messiah, so they're going to go through the tribulation. The guys, they got 7 years of horrible hell on this earth. Whew, not the church, man. Whew, we're gonna go up and have a big banquet dinner for 7 years. Is that true? Talked to a couple different friends saying that. Is that true? We're going to get raptured out of here. We're not subject to wrath. He didn't say he's going to give us a place of enduring everything is coming down. He's going to give us escape. Escape. That's Nun Samikayan. That's escape. He's going to give us refuge. That's Chet Samik. That's escape. But he said that we can find shelter in his name. Does he have to take us out of here? What if he doesn't take us out of here? Gosh, I can't account for the truth of any of those eschatological doctrines, various doctrines. I have no idea whether they're right or wrong. I've heard many different stories over the years, but I haven't heard this story. Why is it that he says the Sabbath day is the sign, the one, Hey, Tav, the sign, sworn by oath, Aleph Vav Tav. If you keep the Yom HaShabbat Kadosh, it's the sign that you're my people and I'm your Elohim. So why for 2,000 years has the people who think they're better than his Elohim, they're the bride of Christ, they changed the day? He said, can a man make Elohim for themselves? They're not Elohim. You make it for yourselves. It ain't, because only what comes from Yahuwah's mouth can be Kadosh. Hence, the angels going around the throne saying Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. I mean, they're giving definition. If it's him, about him, or coming right out of his mouth, it's Kadosh. Soon as I take it into my head and change it, it's no longer Kadosh, it's Halal, Chet Lamed Lamed, profane, vile, desecrated, perverse. I've put human stuff, even if I'm legitimately trying to understand. So a friend of mine was telling me the other day, he says the question of the Sabbath day goes all the way back to a guy named Polycarp and his contender, a guy named Ignatius. First century. Polycarp was a student, a disciple of John the Apostle. So this is right there in the first century. And this guy Ignatius, now I don't know if that's the same Ignatius as Loyola, Catholic, Jesuit thing. Might be, I don't know. But my point is, apparently there was a disagreement between keeping the Sabbath day or changing the Sabbath day to be the seventh day to the first day of the week, changing it. And apparently, the ones who opted for changing the Sabbath day to the first day of the week had the power of Rome with them, or somehow the military companionship, to the point where they hunted down and killed every Sabbath keeper they could find. There was a genocide of Sabbath keepers at that time, thrown to the lions in the Colosseum or murdered in the streets or whatever it was. And again, Sabbath keepers were killed, Huguenots by the French Catholics in the 1500s. Why would Yahuwah allow his Sabbath day keepers to be genocided? Why would he do that? I don't know. What if he does it again? Well, then I might be in big trouble. But wait a minute. They were inside the envelope, under the limit of the 2,730-year curse. That's not for nothing, you know. If Yahweh says to his people in Leviticus 26, I'm going to multiply the curse by 7 times. Yikes. And then multiply which curse? It took him 1,000 years, up into Ezekiel 4, before he ever said what the terms were. 40 days, a day for a year. For the southern kingdom, 390 days, a day for a year, that Ezekiel chapter 4 gave a warning to the northern kingdom. And it didn't even kick in at that exact time. But it was 721 BC that this northern kingdom got taken into captivity. 721 BC. So if I could say, I'm just going to guess that the people that got scattered across the face of the earth, like he said, really did get scattered and really did lose their identity. So therefore, whether you're living in France or Russia or China or Afghanistan or Argentina or Canada, it's like you could be, by genetics, by DNA, part of the scattered seed, or you could be just, hey, I want to be the people of Yahuwah, the emperor of the universe, king of the universe, Melech Haolam. I want to be his people. I want to be his Kadoshi. Okay, it's a wide open door. And we should acknowledge Yahusha. Did he tell his people that? Whether he told his people that or not, I can see that, yes, this Yahusha looks to be the Kadosh Mashiach to me. And so where somebody else says, look, I'm just going to look at the Torah and I don't see Yahusha written in there, and somebody else says, well, I'm reading the New Testament and I don't see the Torah in there, I can see the Ayin Dalet and the Ayin Tav, both. I can see the legitimacy of Yahusha being the door of access to understanding every one of these letters, which is Ayin the Tav. So for me, until the time that you recognize Ayin Dalet and Ayin Tav as two voices of the same thing, though they look opposite, that's kind of like a catch-22. And guess what? There happens to be 22 letters, and gee, it all seems to make sense. And then if I take that value of the letters and start applying them to every single verse, it all makes sense. And then I look at Gadar, and it means give definition, majestic narrative, return, publish a new edition. That's teshuvah. Adornment, citrus fruit. What's within the big white fence? It's all Gadar. Everything we're doing by this study, by this talk, by the Paleo Katana, by the stuff on Mountain Air 7, it's all, who is Yahweh? What did he say? What does it mean to regard Yahusha as Mashiach? We're giving definition to the Kadosh things, the Kadosh matters. And yet there's a lot of voices from religions, from doctrines, from dogma, from maybe so-called would-be prophets and evangelists and preachers and teachers. But are they this? Are they this? Are they gadar gadar? The word beperetz in the condition of peretz means a breach. But see, par, pei resh zadi. Par, pei resh means like puree, fruitful and pleasing. If it means destruction and ruin, resh zadi, rats, like a retz, Aleph resh zadi. Aleph resh zadi is the word for earth, or for land, but it also means I will run volitionally with enthusiasm. If it's a breach in the wall, it also means to go beyond the limit. So I could say, the way it's translated, I wanted to find a man who would stand in the breach or build a wall in the middle of the breach. Breach of what? If the word peretz means to go beyond what is fruitful and pleasing into a place of destruction and ruin, and I could say, this whole, let's just say the transgender, if Elohim made two genders, and now people are saying, hey, there's 120 genders, woohoo! Well, that's a peretz. That's going beyond the contained, the prescribed, what he built. And you could do it if you want. You can think that, you can believe that, you could play around with that if you want. But that's a peretz. And for him to say, Ish gadar gadar ve'amad beperetz, amad is to stand at the position, to arrange things so that they can be valued. Well, that's a synonym with erik, ayin resh kaf, as in the eriktology. It's the same exact word. It's to put things in an order, in such an array that they can be valued. So there's an entire generation being taught right now by universities in America that stuff that Yahweh said just isn't true. We're being taught about science, about medicine, about economy. When I say economy, Yahweh told us to help the widows and orphans and less fortunate. Okay, how do you do that? If you do that, that should help your economy. Even if it's an expense for you to do that, he'll bless you. And talking to somebody the other day, and they said, well, you know, they don't go to a church anymore, but they still send their 10% tithe to that people in that building over there. It's like, did he say to do that? How did all the laws in the Old Testament get nailed to the cross, except for that one in Malachi that he says, bring all the tithes in the storehouse and prove me in this that I will pour out a blessing for you? How did that happen? That's the only law that got retained from the Old Testament into our era, when it's my understanding, I'm not trying to lead anybody astray, but if I read in Deuteronomy about the tithe, he said, store up 10% of your income and spend it on whatever your heart desires at Sukkot. Now, he did say something about bringing food into the place where the priests were. Is that the temple? Is that the Mishkan? Is that share your food so that the priests will have something to eat, because they didn't have an otherwise working job. They didn't have a financial system set up where they could go to the grocery store and buy food exactly. But it's like, what does he really want us to do? So here, this friend of mine is not wanting to betray the rules, the mishpat of the Almighty, so she keeps sending money to the church. Is that even what he said to do? Well, what's a tithe? Well, Melchizedek, Abraham gave him a tithe, did he? So there's a question. It says, if you look exactly, Abraham met up with Melchizedek after Abraham had just conquered 5 kings. Now, those 5 kings had raided the whole area, Sodom and Gomorrah, and all the other cities and villages there. They'd come in with a raiding party just gathered it up like a dragnet and ran off with all the stuff. And Abraham, 300 guys, and overwhelmed them and got it all back. Got it all back. I think it says nobody had been killed, none of the hostages. But the point is, the king of Sodom said to Abraham, "Hey, let me give you of the take the spoils." And he says, "I'm not even going to take one little shoelace from you, lest it be said that you made me rich." Well, wait a minute. Now the story doesn't go into any greater detail, but just think about this. Abraham rescues all the people that have been taken hostage, and there was a bunch of loot that they had taken from those cities, and they gave it all back, apparently. Well, just the defeated army had a bunch of stuff. And then Melchizedek shows up with bread and wine and shares it with Abraham, and it says, and he gave him a tenth of all. It doesn't say who gave who a tenth. Did Melchizedek see in Abraham that he was so highly favored by Elohim, you're so blessed, that maybe Melchizedek gave Abraham a tenth? Or did Abraham say, oh, I recognize that, I know Melchizedek, he's my great uncle Shem, and I'm going to give him a tenth of all the stuff I just got from the battle? It doesn't tell us. And then some people say, well, Melchizedek is the pre-incarnate Christ. It's like, well, then he doesn't need 10% of all the loot that Abraham had gotten from these this other army that he defeated. And it's like, what the heck is going on? When I say what's going on, it's like, what is the precedent he's trying to show us? Why isn't the scripture more specific? Did Melchizedek give Abraham a tenth, or did Abraham give Melchizedek a tenth? Well, then you could look at the book of Jubilees, the book of Jasher, and it gives you more some insight there. But it's like, if I'm just looking at this text right here in Genesis, I don't know. I have to conduct my life as if these words are true, because the words that I was handed from my country, from my culture, from my church and school changed the day. Ignatius killed thousands of Sabbath keepers to prove his point that the day was changed, and Yahuwah let it happen. Does that change the day? Constantine authorized it with empirical decree that no one is allowed to keep the Sabbath day in the Roman Empire without penalty. Does that change the day? And if it doesn't change the day, then somehow, for some reason, Yahuwah let his enemies, the enemies of his people, rule with impunity, rule apparently victoriously, and triumph over Yahweh's intervention. Why? Well, because he said that he was going to do that for 2,730 years. We just read here this word for as if you were orphans. That's based on the spelling of a word here, Yod Tav Mem, I think is the word here. Kaf Lamed Yod Tav Yod Mem. Yod Tav Mem means to make an orphan. Yeah, but that's not the word that's spelled there. Kaf Lamed Yod Tav Yod Mem. Yod Mem is plural, but Kaf Lamed means all. Kaf Lamed Hei is the bride. Kaf Lamed Yod, completed, finished, but destroyed and consumed. The word right before that was Ayin Bet Resh Tav Yod. Well, Ayin Bet Resh is the word Hebrew, Eber, crossed over. Hey, that's past tense. So it looks like he's saying he's going to pour out, this is verse 31, Aleph Shin Pei Kaf. Well, Shin Pei Kaf means to pour out or spill. Aleph Shin Pei is a quiver for arrows. So to unload the whole quiver full of arrows, Ayin Lamed Yod Hei Mem, from above them, Ayin Lamed Yod Ali, Zion Ayin Mem Yod. Zion Ayin Mem is, if you add a noon, it's black snake. It's indignant, angry, wrath, ba'ash, with fire. Ayin Bet Resh Tav Yod. That's the word Hebrew, past tense, crossed over. It's like, that's it. You've pushed me over the edge. There's no going back. No going back for how long? Well, the time of the curse was 2,730 years. So what I'm saying is that the only thing I can do is look at the history, the Huguenots, Ignatius killing the Sabbath keepers. This is a really serious thing, this 2,730-year curse of his indignant wrath poured out on his people as if they were orphans. Dalet Resh Kaf Mem. Kaf Mem is the suffix for your. Dalet Resh is generation, but Dalet Resh Kaf is way, journey, path, led, guided, directed, walking. Because of your manner of walking. And then the word Berasham Natati, Nam Adonai Yahweh. But Berasham, that's like Bereshit. It's at the beginning. Primordial, Bet Resh Aleph Shin. Resh Aleph Shin, head, chief, beginning, top, summit, foundation, choice, best, part, primary. On their head, and then Nun Tav Tav Yod. Tav Yod is a suffix, I will or I have. Nun Tav, like Nun Tav Nun, is give or teach. Tav Tav is the basis underfoot where you stand. So he's saying, where you stand, I'm going to pour on your head your own stuff, this quiver of arrows of fire, of wrath, because of your way of walking. I told you. I told you again and again, repeatedly, forcefully, I involve Dalet. So for him to not destroy his people, pouring out wrath, well, and that's what he said he was going to do, he'd be breaking his word. He can't break his word unless he can find a loophole. What's the loophole? A man who would gadar, that's the loophole. So when we ask the rhetorical question, how many of who has to do what, when, for how long, with what heart, before Yahweh will intervene, or before he'll back off from the, he said if he could, Abraham stopped at saying, is it 10? No, I'll still destroy. If I find 10, I won't destroy. Why? Because 10's a minion, a legal quorum, a legal minimum. Abraham was just wondering. I don't think Abraham was contending for Sodom, but imagine if there was 10 people, then all the great evil. And you read the book of Jasher, and it explains the great evil that was being done in Sodom and Gomorrah, and that whole culture was just reprehensible. It was vile. It was so, gosh, why does he let this go? Well, you could look at what's happening in America as well as around the world right now and say, why does he let this go? Well, because there's more than 10 people doing what he said. Wait a minute. Do we want him to take care of business or not? I don't even know what to ask for. There was so much evil corruption going on in our country here, as well as what's perpetrated around the world, that it almost feels like it would be a more noble thing to be like Samson and say, I'm going to stand right in the middle of it and push these pillars and just take me out with it. You got to get rid of these guys. You just got to get rid of what's going on here. But like with Abraham and Sodom, if I find 10, I'm not going to destroy the entire valley of, there's like 7 cities there. Well, then get rid of the 10 people. You know, hey, let's call them away for Sukkot and then nail the place. I mean, not because I'm a proponent of just killing all these people, but how does he extinguish the evil? How does he cleanse the pollution? Well, if we just would change our hearts and walk in his ways. But he can't even seem to get his own people to walk in his ways. Now, we don't have to. Jesus died on the cross. We don't have to do what he said. Well, if that's not true either, If just because Jesus died on the cross, it doesn't absolve us as walking in his ways, then the institution which propagates that understanding is itself evil, is wrong, is a lie, is a distortion which is misrepresenting his face, which makes it evil, different than the truth. So it's not a question of saying, well, don't do the people that are adhering to those doctrines, do they think they're true? They could think they're true, but is it true? Well, what's a measure of truth? It all goes back to saying, for me to say the truth is what's in these letters. Well, these letters compose the Torah, and they tell us to walk in his ways. What are his ways? The Moedim are his ways. Well, then if the Moedim are the ways of truth, then the institution, the entire 2,000 years of, let's just say, a couple billion people that believe it, ought to be walking in his ways. And to say, no, they were done away with at the cross, well, then the disciples would never have been meeting in the upper room on the day of Pentecost, because that was the day, the 50th day of counting Shavuot, and they were there because they were keeping the Moed of Shavuot. It had not been done away with. Just that one story is proof. It was called a detestable practice that was then made illegal by the Roman Empire. Years later, Council of Nicaea. Well, but I've heard it that the Great Council, the Ecumenical Council of Nicaea, was a holy event by which the Orthodox Church still heralds its sanctity. But it's perverse. It's not true. It's wrong. It's not Kadosh. It's not Yahuwah. If it's not Kadosh and it's not Yahuwah, then by definition, it's an Elohim Achrim. And when the second commandment, after he says, Anoki Yahweh Elohecha, I just took you out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery and bondage, he says, Lo yayi lecha Elohim Achrim al panei. Do not by your hand cause to exist. Yod Hei, Yod Hei. Not Yod, but Yod Hei, Yod Hei. Lo Yaya. It's don't allow to exist or cause to exist laka, of your own hand. Don't authorize, don't allow, don't perpetuate, don't celebrate each year the same things just because your forefathers did if they're Elohim Acharim. Achar. Next, different, strange, other. Other than what? What did he give us? He gave us the Shabbat and the 7 Moedim. Leviticus 23. Why did he empower Ignatius to prevail against the Sabbath keepers? Because there's a 2,730-year curse is the only thing I can say. So for me to say, uh-oh, they're about to do it again, I heard someone just tell me the other day, they're gearing up for another Holocaust, another Inquisition, another going to hunt us down. They're going to hunt down all the Sabbath keepers and kill them. That's what they are planning. Come on, Yahweh, you said that this is the sign we're your people. And even Jesus said, hey, they killed me, they're going to kill you. Don't expect anything better. And it's like, oh, crap. Don't expect anything better. I'm expecting you to do what you said. You said your name would be a high tower of refuge. I don't read where he said, expect there to be a rapture. I know I was taught that, but I can't find where it says that exactly. That's a doctrine. It's a talk, but I can't point to the verse. If someone can find the verse, I mean, we can talk about that. He told me to expect refuge. He told me to expect that his name certainly is an escape, a nun samic. What does that mean? Can the bad guy still come and round us up and throw us in the fiery furnace or throw us into the Colosseum of wild animals? If he allows that, then he allows that. There's a whole list of things they have done over the years that I won't go into. Fox's Book of Martyrs talks about that. Pretty nasty stuff. But what I'm saying is, all I've got is Yahweh is my Elohim, and these words tell somebody to organize a presentment, a mod, to stand in the breach, build a wall standing in the breach. What does that mean? Build a presentment by which that which has gone out of bounds is given definition, and we can count on it and trust it, saying it gives it definition because ayin dalet ayin tav, because Yeshua, his story, Yahusha, being the one coming from heaven to earth, being killed in the tomb 3 days and 3 nights. There's Kaf Lamed Mem Nun Samak Ayin Pei. It's a pattern, and then Dadi breaking out, resurrecting, and then rising up, coming back. There's the Kuf. There's the fence. The organization is the fence, arranged Ayin Mem Dalet to stop things going whichever way they're going to go. Peretz. Lifnei, according to my face. Ba'ad, as a testimony for the sake of the land, in order that otherwise it's going to be destroyed by terror. Critical stuff. We're at the end here. But just saying, the reason I'm talking about this and didn't really get into any more verses than just these 2 in Ezekiel 22 is because there's a lot of people that don't believe that this has any credibility. I think this is the stuff of the only credibility because they've lied about everything else. The scientists have lied, the educators have lied, the politicians have lied, the doctors have lied, the preachers and scientists, and everybody's lied. This is the truth, as far as I can see, and I can't see anything wrong or anything fallacy about what these letters say. This is the truth. So it's worthy of our attention. And to define it by its own merit, the highest merit, that Yahusha is Mashiach, that value of his resurrection, the Peresh Zadi. Again, all I can do is go back over the same words again and again and again and say, this is the only place of sanity. And there's libraries and encyclopedias full of lies and insanity. And somehow this one thing that they missed, that they didn't invade, the Paleo-Hebrew, is the place of truth. Or that's the way I see it. Anyway, there you go, Kurt.
Thank you, Father, for everybody. Keep people safe in the dispersion. In Yahuwah's name I pray. Amen.